To log into the Phoenix SQL product, you need to provide your login credentials. So for this demo, we're doing OSales, and the password for that user is 12345. Once I've logged into the application, you have your various modules on the left-hand side: administration, sites, accounts, cards, scheduler, FSC transactions, ATG transactions, and reports. Underneath administration, we have what's called an address book. An address book consists of all employees that would basically have access to this program, or contacts of various fuel sites or fuel providers and so forth. So to add an entry into the address book, you click on the address book selection. As you can see, we have some entries in here already. To click a new entry, we'll click on Add on the ribbon bar and put in the required parameters, which are noted by the red asterisk. So we're going to enter in Joe Black as a entry book user. We can give him what company name he's under, what organization, a title, if he's got an employee ID, an email address, and so forth. These are the two required parameters for the address book entry. So this is all I'm going to enter in right now, and I'll click Apply to save that. And if I have additional entries I want to add in, I can do so. And that's all there is to entering an entry into the address book. Continuing on underneath administration, we have groups as our next choice. Groups allows you to basically set up various permissions for users that are assigned to them to have certain privileges of the program itself. There's view privileges, edit privileges, and manage privileges. So to create a specific group, you click on Add, and off the add, give the group a specific name. So let's say this is a view-only group. So with a view-only group, they can basically look at information, but they cannot edit or manage anything within the group. And you select what information this group can manage: site information only, accounts, or both. Okay, so we'll give this view group both access to sites and accounts, and then off the site axis we select what sites they can view information from. So we have a listing of all the sites that are currently configured in this database. Maybe I want this view group for site being only site 001 and 002. So I'll change that name to say view group 001 and 002. Select the two sites and then have them have access to all account information within those sites. And the accounts information would also include the cards that are available within these various accounts. And then we click Apply. And let's say we want to create another group. So there's the group that we just created called View Group. And let's add another group in that maybe has some edit privileges. So I'll click another Add, and I'll just give it Edit Site 001, 002. So not only will the edit group have view privileges automatically, but it'll allow them to also make changes within the site access and account access windows. And then the third group we can create, obviously, it would be adding a group that's called Manage. And with Manage capabilities, you get the capability of viewing, editing, also deleting and adding new information. So you're like your own little administrator for these specific sites and accounts that you assign to a managed group. I'll just select a couple accounts. So that's what you have to do if you have the group feature. This is the way you go about setting up the various groups. Now that I've got entries in my address book and I also have groups selected and compiled, I now can do the users function, which allows me to create a user from the address book entry and assign it to any of the groups that I've created. So from the users menu, I'm going to go down to the bottom and select add. And then from the name drop down list, these would be entries that you've entered into your address book. And you can see the last two that I've entered in, Joe Black and Andy Sales. So maybe I want Joe Black and as a user. By default, the username is selected by the first letter of the first name and the full last name. You can give the user a password. It tells you how the strength of the password is. Okay, and then you could select what group you want him to be assigned to. He can be assigned to the built-in admin group. So if he wants to be a Phoenix administrator, he can. He can be awarded to the tech support group or any of these other groups that were created underneath the groups feature. And you can see the last three groups that I created was called the View Group 001002, Edit Site 001002, and Manage 001002. So I will just select them to the View Group. And then you can put in an address if you want, a phone number, mobile number, fax, email, SMS, select what language, session time, and the page size, which the page size comes into play when you start looking at the accounts, cards, and transaction information that displays how many records will be displayed per page. Okay. And once you get your information set up, you would click on Apply, and that would add that user to the user group called View Groups 001002. And that's using the Phoenix name user ID. There is an option that's called Windows Authentication, which if the IT department sets up with the Phoenix SQL product, there's a utility that can be run outside the program where they get set up the directory for the users to be using their Windows login method. Next, we're going to go underneath Administration and go to System Setup. Under System Setup, you have the password requirements, and this are setting up the password requirements for the users that you create. You can set up the number of characters, what the minimum length is, and set up the password strength to be strong, moderate, or weak. Fuel site controller, whether or not you're using accounts in your fuel site controller. If you are, you make sure the radio button that says fuel site controller uses account cards is set. If you're not using accounts on your fuel site controller, then you select the second choice, which will give you the choice, the fuel site controller, do not use account cards. And because I've had this feature set up already in my program, it's letting me know that any system account number that I already created are going to be cleared from the account window. So I'm going to go ahead and click X out of that because I don't want to clear that. And then you have the last choice, which is called auto flag all new modified cards for update. And this feature, when it's set, would allow you not to have to check on each card screen as you enter the card in a update card box. And I can show you that by going into the card screen here for a second. And I'll just pick one of the cards off my list and edit that. And that box right there would not have to be checked as you're making changes or adding new cards into the program when you have that feature set underneath the fuel site controller, this flag here. Okay, clicking on the general setup, you have selections to make whether you're in the US or if you're in a foreign country. Use gallons, not liters, as the unit of measure. Use miles, not kilometers, for the distance traveled. And the third option is whether or not you want Phoenix to generate a PIN number as you're creating cards in your system. Bad odometer tracking. You can have Phoenix SQL checking the odometer entries on the transactions that it's downloading into its SQL database for single-digit entries, the same digit entered in multiple times, a sequential value entered in, or if an MPG defined for the record is out of range. This has nothing to do with what's going on at the fuel island. This only gets applied to the transaction data as it's being downloaded into the SQL database. User strings. Underneath the user strings, there are some additional labels that can be set up within the application itself. If you're using the miscellaneous keyboard entry title in your fuel management system for an additional data entry, such as maybe an hour meter reading or hour reading, you can change that title, say hour reading, and anywhere within the program that has a miscellaneous entry title, that label will change from miscellaneous to hour reading. On your account form windows, if you need additional labels to be set up for maybe like a primary contact, a cell number, emergency contact number, you can change that information on your account screen. We'll put in here primary contact as an example, and I'll click apply here. And for a moment, I'm going to step out of the system setup window and show you where this would be applied to. So I go to my account screen, go to account info, and I'll just pick any of the accounts that I have set up in the program and click edit. And basically it'll show me underneath my miscellaneous account data that new field that I set up as my primary contact. And then I can put whatever information I want to be represented underneath that field. So going back to your system setup window, user strings, you have 4 of those labels that are underneath the account form, and then you have 2 additional labels for the card form. And I'll set this up here as cell number, and I'll click apply. And again, I will jump out of this screen and show you where that's applied to on the card screen. And I'll click on any one of my existing cards. And there's the field there, cell number, and I would just put in what the cell number is. And then you can see user number 2, which is not defined yet. Jumping back to user strings, there are labels for the transaction window. The card 1 title, which typically refers to drivers. I've had this changed already to driver equipment. Sometimes the driver 1 title or the card 1 title is referred to as an employee, and I can change that to be employee number. Oops. Okay, and then employee name. So this would be their number that they key in, and this would be their name. And if they're fueling vehicles or trucks, you can change the title to say vehicle or trucks, and same thing, whatever this title is changed to, the short name should reference that. So if I click apply here on the screen again, I'm going to jump out just to my transaction window and show you where that is applied to. Okay, there's the employee name, there's the default vehicle name, and there's the employee number and then the vehicle number. This is a network transaction, so some of these fields are used for transaction information from the network. If I go to a plain non-network card transaction, then you can see an employee name. This is the actual name for this card number, employee number. Okay. And there's your hour reading for the miscellaneous field. And that's it for the user strings. Reasonability. If you're using in your fuel site controller the optional odometer reasonability, where you're assigning mileage ranges to your proprietary cards and they have to fall, the mileage that they be entering at the fuel system has to fall within that certain range. Well, this is the table that Phoenix references when you're adding code numbers to your individual single cards or vehicle cards. Each code number has a minimum range and a maximum mileage range on there. You can see as code 01 references 0 miles travels to a maximum of 100. So if a card has this code assigned to it, a mileage that falls within these parameters is considered reasonable. Anything outside of that range is considered unreasonable. The whole point being here is this is a reference table within Phoenix. This table is applied to your fuel site controller. So you got to make sure that the reasonability table that you just look in the lookup list in Phoenix has the same values for each code number in your fuel site controller. So you want to make sure if you're putting a restriction of code 02 in this example here of 0 to 250, that on the fuel site controller level, when code 2 is applied there, that it is also set up to be 0 to 250 and not something other than that. Continuing on with products. This is your reference table of 32 possible products that any one site controller can have. Again, this is a reference table within Phoenix, so when it gets transaction data with a system code for the product that it received from the fuel site controller, it looks at that code number on this table here to see what the description is. So if I got a transaction that has a product code of 01 come back, that code 01 is then looked up in this table here for the description, and this is this description that Phoenix will pull off and generate on the reports that are used through the program. So basically, if you change the description here of 01 to be diesel, for instance, then you want to make sure again that in your fuel type code table set up in all your controllers that code 1 is also changed there to be diesel, so that all matches across the board. Once your products are finished, if you're using multiple products at a site, you need to set up product restriction. If you go into the product restrictions setup, here again, these are codes that are referred to on your fuel site controller. Code 00 is no restrictions, and then by default there's a couple set up here for us already, like code 01 says unleaded only. This can be changed. This code 2 is diesel only. Code 3 we got 10W30. Code 4 is 10W50. Okay, so when you're setting up your cards in the system in Phoenix, you're going to assign what code you want assigned to that particular card. So if I assign a card of code 01, it's going to look at this code 01. It shows you the description is unleaded only. So when this card is swiped in at your fuel system, it's going to look to see what code 01 is set up in the fuel system to determine what products it can actually get there. So you want to make sure that on your fuel system level side that it's also set up to be good for only unleaded products. So this table needs to match what your fuel site controller table is set up to. Quantity restriction. If you're using quantity restriction on your fuel site controllers, again, we have a system code that can be assigned to each card that you create within Phoenix and a value that's represented for each code. These values can represent whole quantities or dollar values depending on how your fuel site controller is configured. So basically what this means is whatever we have for code 1 here, if it says 20, we want to make sure that code 1 on your fuel site controller has that also set to 20, and that's some other value. Okay, these are all defaulted to what the fuel site controller defaults to when you first take it out of the box, but here they can be programmed to represent different values, and they just have to match across the board. Message prompts. If your fuel system is set up to use additional prompting to your proprietary cards outside of the standard prompts that are used in the fuel system. You want to make sure that if the additional prompt table has been modified in the fuel site controller, where maybe A doesn't say reefer fuel any longer, if it says some other text there, you want to make sure that Phoenix represents the same text. These code letters are all from a table A through T, which is a separate table that's managed by the individual fuel site controllers. So here again, you just want to make sure that if prompt code A is reefer fuel, yes or no, that it matches what prompt code A is in the actual fuel site controller. Okay, and that's really all you have to worry about. If you're managing a fuel site controller that's using the optional chip key mileage reasonability software, then there are chip key tables that need to be matched across the board. We have chip key odometer lower limits, upper limits, and then we have daily limits. Underneath the chip key odometer lower limits, this is a code number that represents what the lowest amount of miles traveled could be entered in. And then we have the chip key upper limit, and again it has code numbers 01 through 15 for the upper range codes. So these values basically get entered in onto the card record that's defined for the actual chip key, and allows them to assign a upper and lower range code to the chip key and what the lowest mileage could be entered into a maximum mileage for that reasonability to be put into play for that particular key. Then we also have what's called a daily chip key limit, where if you want to limit how many times they can use their chip key with the reasonability software per day, 00 being a no daily limit, they can fuel as many times as they want, or you have 01 through 09 representing how many times they can get fuel for the day. The last thing for chip key mileage reasonability to work is setting up what they call is the chip key method. In the chip key method, there's 4 different possibilities on how you want to log the bad odometer entries, and these entries are actually these are methods that are programmed on the actual chip key itself, telling it how to handle the bad odometers. 00 meaning it's a bypass on the chip key, meaning any odometer that key in is considered valid. 01 being the most restrictive. If this is applied to the key, then if the entries are all out of the range and beating the lower and upper range that's assigned to the key becomes invalidated immediately without any fueling. The second choice is after the third bad entry, if it's set up for method 2, it'll allow you to fuel one time, and in the mileage field it'll put in of the transaction record less than signs, and then the key will be invalidated. And then 3 and 4 kind of are the go-arounds, meaning you'll always be able to get fuel. It's basically how it's going to log the transaction with the odometer being out of range. Method 3, fueling's always allowed, but if all 3 entries are out of range and are different, it will put equal signs in the mileage field of the transaction record that's pulled across. The key never gets invalidated. And then method number 4, fueling's always allowed, and if all 3 bad entries are the same, then basically it'll put in greater than signs. I know you can't see this here. And the mileage that's put in there is incorrect, but it's been entered in twice. That mileage gets written to the key itself, and there will be greater than signs that get logged into the transaction record. Here again, that's more of a fuel site controller setup more than anything else. This is just values that can be set up on the card records that get written to your chip keys. Card status. Underneath your card status window, you have code 00, which means the card is always considered a valid card. And then we've predetermined a few invalid codes as to why a card could become invalid. Just simply being invalid or being invalid due to a 3 bad PIN entry, meaning if you had the PIN numbers turned on in your fuel site controller and you have a feature in there that if they get prompted for their PIN and they put their PIN number wrong incorrectly 3 consecutive times, the fuel system will invalidate it due to a 3 bad PIN. So that code is code 2. And then you have code 3 is by default set up in Phoenix that it's invalid due to balance overdue, they're not paying. Invalid number 4, manager disapproved. And then you got some additional ones here. It says for code 5, locked out bad credit, locked out card lost, invalid lost. You could define an additional ones 8 through 15 if you needed to. So that's really all there is on the card status. And basically, when you're entering your cards or you're making a change to an existing card, there is a field called card status. So if someone needs to be invalidated on the fly, maybe they no longer work at the company, you can change it immediately to invalid, and then we would show you how to push the update down to the system so that it is actually changed there on the fuel site controller also. The system error log is really used for our engineering group. As you can see, there's various system errors that were created in this application demo that we have displayed here. If there was something that our engineering team would like to see from the application, they would basically direct us to get the information sent to them through an email or maybe to our tech support department. This is just a view screen. They would get more information from the actual email that would be sent over to us. The user audit trail, it's a paper trail letting you know what user was logged in under what module. So the action is the module that they're under. So administration, that's this module here. You can see here cards, what user was logged in doing what function at what date and time, what record they were modifying, and what the previous data was for that record. So it's sort of a paper trail for the overall system administrator of Phoenix. So if something got removed from the program, they can actually go into the user audit trail to look to see what user was logged in, the date and the time, and what they actually touched. There is a report that we'll show you later on that can be generated for the user audit trail also. Card defaults allows you to set up a template as a default for all your cards that you create within the system. You can set up a card template for single type cards if you're using single cards at your site. We also have driver and vehicle, which kind of work together. You can't set up driver cards in the system without having vehicle cards and vice versa. So the cards that are used by the OPW equipment, the MagStripe cards, the proprietary ones, are formatted as 16-digit numbers. If you didn't want to have to keep keying in a 16-digit number every time you had a new card number into the program, this is what the default screen allows you to do, is predefine maybe the first 10, 12 digits of the card number, and then all you would have to put in is the remaining digits to make it a complete 16-digit card number. The same thing would hold true as if you're using chip keys. Chip keys come in several different formats. There's an 8-digit key format, a 10-digit key format, and a 19-digit key format. Obviously, when you get to the 19-digit key format, it'd be kind of nice to just pre-configure the first 15 digits on a default template so that all you have to do is key in the last 5 or last 4 digits to make it a 19-digit number. So that's what the default screen is used for. I'm going to show you how to set one up for maybe a single card. So the account is going to be grayed out because we want this to be available for any account that you create a card to in a system. So that's why that's grayed out. The type of record, we're going to create a single. Okay, and then for our example, we're going to set it up for all sites. Make sure your card status is valid. and then you pre-configure the first. Now this is a MAG card, so that we're going to do here as an example. So we're going to pre-configure the first 12 digits. So all we have to key in is like the last 4 unique numbers, and I've already set that up here. And you definitely don't want to put in a restriction of any sort, because if the card is going to be unique, you can modify the restriction on the card as you're creating it. If you're going to use additional prompts underneath the verify prompts, here again you can assign the prompt sequence that every single card user is going to get in the system. And once you've clicked apply and click OK, now we have our template built up for single type cards. So I'm going to go into my card screen now, go to card info, and I'll click in add, and just going to go through adding in a new single card to show you how that template works. I'll select which account I want to add this card into, and my card type, as soon as I select single, you'll see that now the card number field gets populated with the first 12 digits, and say it's card number 1234. There's a total of 16 digits. There's the site. It was already selected for all sites. Now I can put in specific restrictions for that card, quantity, product, if I was using odometer reasonability. Again, if there was something that wasn't set in the template, and or maybe there was and I don't want it to prompt for an odometer entry, I can uncheck that. And I also can modify the verify prompts. Maybe I don't want it to have all 3 of these prompts. I can just eliminate that. And now we just click OK, apply, and that'll add it into the program if I had the other information created in there, such as the name. Okay. And I'll show you one more template under card defaults if you've got chip keys, and say maybe you're going to use them as vehicles, just to show you the difference. Okay, I predefined the first 15 digits already. Okay, and this is doing a read-write chip key, so you want to make sure that this checkbox is checked. Okay, again, we're not going to set any of the restrictions on it. And since this is a read-write chip key, we need to set up what we want the read-write parameters to be for the warning limit and no fuel limit. You actually would need to know what the mileage is on the current value of the vehicle that this key is going to be assigned to. So leaving this at 0 would be fine. However, you can apply a lower odometer and upper odometer range limit by selecting it from the drop-down selections. And then you can select the daily fueling if you want to have a limit. If you don't, set it to no limit. And with method of reasonability you're going to use for your read-write chip keys. So now that template is saved, I'm going to go to my card screen, card info, and I'm going to add in a new read-write chip key. I'm just going to select the first account off the screen, select it as a vehicle. Okay, I'm just going to key in the last few digits. Maybe restrict it to unleaded only. And I do want to allow this for an odometer entry. And you see there's nothing there because there's nothing in the template for that. And then there's my read-write parameters. Maybe I want to change this to be upper odometer range to 500. So I can also change that for this particular key number that I'm setting up instead of using the default from the template. I've got to add a name in, obviously. And there it goes. So that's all there is for setting up your card templates for the defaults. Fuel zones. Fuel zones is a new feature that was added into the SQL version of Phoenix. Phoenix was designed originally to manage a global card file. We came out with the fuel zone feature. The fuel zone feature allows you to segregate where the cards can be used at what locations. So underneath fuel zones, if I pick one of the ones that have been created already in this database and edit, it shows me that fuel zone number 1 is good for site number 1. So that means if I add a new card into the program and I assign it to fuel zone number 1, that card would only be going to site number 1 off of this fuel zone. If I set it up to fuel zone ID number 2, a card, then these would be the sites that the card would be good for. And then number 3 is good for site number 2. So this allows you to lock where the cards are going to be passed over to which sites within the fuel zones itself. And you'll see that when you go into your card screen underneath Phoenix, you have a choice when you have your cards in the program, whether it's going to all sites, or if you're going to uncheck that, then you select what zone you want that card to go to. The next module we're going to go through is called Sites. Underneath Sites is where the site information for each fuel site controller that Phoenix is going to connect to and download and retrieve information from needs to be entered into the database. Okay, you can see I've got a few sites already created here. So within the site info, I'll click one off the list and show you what needs to be entered into the program. We have a unique site ID, which can be anywhere from 001 through 998. And this is the ID number that Phoenix identifies the site as. You have a specific site name that you attach to the site, a site manager, and a site manager can be any of your users that you've got set up or anybody from the address book entries. Okay. And then underneath the communications setup, we have what type of FSC it is, whether it's an ART FSC 3000 with networks enabled, or is it an FSC 3000 proprietary cards only. We've got some System 2 choices. We've got a choice for a integrated unit, meaning Phoenix doesn't physically connect to a site controller at all, but the user uses the USB key function to manage the card updates and transaction uploads. So you have your configuration type for what type of FSC, and then you have your connection method and how Phoenix is going to connect to your actual fuel site controller. We got network TCP/IP, a direct serial connection, or a modem dial-up. Okay. A TCP/IP connection, you would have to set up the IP address and the port socket that it's going to connect to that 3000 with. And then we have the password requirements from each site controller, password 1, 2, and 3 respectively. If we're going to do a serial connection, you need to tell it that's a direct connect and which COM port of the server it's going to use to connect to your fuel site controller. The baud rate of the controller itself. The stop bits has got to be set to 1. Data length is 7, and parity should be set to even. The baud rate is dip switch selectable in that particular controller. If it's not going to be a direct serial connection but a dial-up modem connection, then you need to set up the actual phone number, and here again what port your modem is assigned to, your baud rate, stop bits, data length has to be 7, and parity has to be even. We have pre-dial and post-dial strings depending if there is switch boxes being used at the site. Sometimes phone lines are shared between various devices, so there might be like a switch box that we're actually dialing into, so we might have to put in a post-dial string to switch the electronic switch box. Not commonly used too much any longer, but it was available at one point in time. And then there may be a pre-dial string that maybe we'll have to initialize the modem specifically for this site to connect at a different baud rate than other sites. I'm going to go back to my TCP/IP setting and actually just click cancel. I don't want to change anything there. Okay, so once you have your communications set up, okay, then if you have a tank monitor at your site, then you select what type of tank monitor or an ATG you're going to connect to. Okay, and here again you need to provide the connection method to that tank monitor. Okay, the connection method could be network TCP/IP. We have direct connect, dial-up, or an FSC pass-through port. An FSC pass-through port indicates that we're actually connecting to the fuel site controller first, and then the fuel site controller has a cable connection from it to the tank monitor within 50 feet. I'll leave it at TCP/IP, and you'll see there's the IP address for the tank monitor and then the port socket that it's assigned to. Also underneath there is the FSC miscellaneous, where you give it a 12-character short name and a checkbox whether or not you want to update the cars after polling is completed, and if you want to clear transactions after poll. Underneath the ATG miscellaneous, there's just a choice there for fuel provider. On your site info screen, you have the ability to poll any site immediately from your drop-down list. You would select what site you want to poll from, and then you click on the poll site button. When you select that, it'll give you a message that you've requested to poll fueling transactions for site 001. Click yes to continue. And when you do that, that will send a message down to the service engine, which is the communication piece of Phoenix, which will go out and try to connect to that fuel system and bring your transactions across. Once it's done polling, you can check underneath the history button to see what the results were. After you've got your tank gauge set up underneath your site info, you need to set up the tanks for that tank monitor. Click on tanks, and here you can see there are a bunch of tanks already added in for the various sites. We'll just select site 001 from our list and show you individual tanks. Tank 1 is set up, the ID is number 1. This needs to match the ID number of the tank monitor tank setup, type of tank it is, and set to standard, but you'll have different choices available to you. You got standard primary, secondary, manifold master and slave, and then you have manifold master primary, manifold master secondary, and blended. And then which product is being dispensed from that tank. So if you've got 3 tanks for the tank gauge, you should have 3 tanks then configured for that site within the Phoenix database with the proper grade of fuel attached to them. After you've completed entering your tanks, the next step is going into pumps and adding in the pumps for the location. And this basically should match your fuel site controller configuration. So we've got on site number 1, pump number 1, what hose, and the tank product that it's mapped to. Now there's 8 hose positions because we can control multi-grade dispensers, which would have more than 1 hose attached to it. So that's the reason for having additional hoses. So you need to set up each pump the way they're configured in your fuel site controller. So there's pump number 1, and there's pump number 2. Okay, before you can use the terminal window, you have to download the security keys on the machine that you're actually running the terminal window function for. You click on Download Security Keys, click on Open, and there's the security keys folder. You want to extract all the files from that. Click Yes, and we'll do a copy and replace because we did do these before. The Install Terminal Window License Key executable, you want to right mouse click on that and select Run as Administrator. Answer yes to the question, and then you have a quick install. Close all the windows down. Now you're ready to use the terminal window in Phoenix on the machine. Click on Open Terminal. Answer OK to this question. And then now you'll be able to connect to whatever sites you have programmed into your system. You select a site that you want to connect to, and then you click on your Connect button. That's how you download security keys and open up your terminal window. Underneath Site Utilities, if you have an older System 2 fuel site controller, then you have the capability of backing up the system configuration. That's what the backup does. And the system configuration would be the way your pumps are configured, your messages are set up, the terminals are set up, everything excluding card information and transaction data. The restore is just the opposite. So if you have a System 2 fuel site controller, these two features available to you. Okay, so do not select the 3000 controller and try to do a backup. That will not work for you. Underneath Site Utilities, if you have an older System 2 fuel site controller, then you have the capability of backing up the system configuration. That's what the backup does. And the system configuration would be the way your pumps are configured, your messages are set up, the terminals are set up, everything excluding card information and transaction data. The restore is just the opposite. So if you have a System 2 fuel site controller, these two features available to you. Okay, so do not select the 3000 controller and try to do a backup. That will not work for you. If you're managing a integrated system that Phoenix does not have a physical connection to poll the transactions, but they are using the USB key function, there is the import poll file capability. And what that allows you to do then is once you take the USB key and you drop it onto your machine, you click on the import poll file section and click on browse, and then point Phoenix to the K25-100 TRN file that's on your USB key, and that will allow you to import the transactions from that integrated unit into the Phoenix program. Email log, there are log files within the application that are typically stored on the actual server that the service engine's installed on. If tech service would like to get a copy of the log file, we can request an email of it, or we can actually direct you to how to get to the log file and bring it up on a remote comm session. If you're managing a integrated system that Phoenix does not have a physical connection to poll the transactions, but they are using the USB key function, there is the import poll file capability. And what that allows you to do then is once you take the USB key and you drop it onto your machine, you click on the import poll file section and click on browse, and then point Phoenix to the K25-100 TRN file that's on your USB key, and that will allow you to import the transactions from that integrated unit into the Phoenix program. Email log, there are log files within the application that are typically stored on the actual server that the service engine's installed on. If tech service would like to get a copy of the log file, we can request an email of it, or we can actually direct you to how to get to the log file and bring it up on a remote comm session. Fuel provider allows you to add in a fuel provider for who provides you the fuel for your systems. So give it a name. You can see that you just basically have a couple required fields, but you can put in an address, city, state, a zip code, country not necessary, contact name, if he has an email address, what product they're responsible for, and then obviously the phone number, and any other information from Memo 1, and click Apply. And if you got another fuel provider, you can add that into the system. So when you go to your site info screen now and click on any of your sites, click Edit. Now you can select who the fuel provider is for that particular location and click Apply. Accounts. Underneath accounts we have account info and deleted accounts. Account info is where you would create your account information for basically setting up various departments for billing purposes. You can see we have a few accounts added in here. We'll create a new account right off the bat. So we're going to click on Add, and then you have underneath the account information an account ID. The account ID is what Phoenix will reference for its billing reports. This can be alphanumeric, so I'll just call this A, B, C, D, E, F, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as an example. And I'll just call it maybe a house account. Okay. Then we have on the right hand side the actual system account number that we want to link to this Phoenix account ID. The system account number is what's going to be utilized by your fuel site controller. That account number is a unique 4-digit number starting from 0001 through 9999. So I will just give this a random 4-digit number and hope that it's not being used already by the system. And then the short name is the short name field that's used by the fuel site controller for this account number. And it can be an abbreviation of your long name if you like. It's only a 9-character field. Then you have the status, whether or not it's valid or invalid. The account contact, and here again you pick an entry off your address book if you like. And if he had additional information about himself, the address and phone number and stuff, this field information will get populated. And then you have the FSC account information. Okay, whether or not you want to restrict the account to certain grades of product. Okay, and when you do this, this will override the individual cards that are assigned to the account. So basically you normally would leave the account restriction wide open for the FSC. The same thing would hold true for the quantity restriction. These would just basically fall back on the individual card records that you're assigning to the account, which we'll get into our next section. If you're using daily allocation or monthly allocation in the fuel site controller, then obviously you have to put in a daily dollar limit that the account is good for and a monthly dollar limit. Along with the expiration date feature. If they're using the expiration date in your fuel site controller, then you need to set up an expiration date for every system account that you're going to use. And then if you're making any subtle changes here, you want to click on the Update Account button, and underneath the miscellaneous account, if you had additional fields set up, you can put that information in. Put in like a note scratch pad area of anything that needs to be pertinent for the person viewing this account. And if you had any verify accounts set up, or just want additional prompts to be assigned to this account, again, you can look at the list of the various prompts. If your field system is set up to use these prompts, whatever letters you assign to this account, those are the prompts that are going to be assigned to every card user that's under this account. And once you're done with that, you click apply, and that would add in the new account into your database. And I can go to account info, and should be able to see that off the list, and there it is right there. And if I click on it, and there's the information. And you can see there is no cards assigned to that account yet, but it is a valid account. Deleted accounts. If you're deleting accounts from the program, it basically just removes them from the account info view and puts them into the delete account view. And basically the only thing that you can do is restore the account if you want to restore it back in. Truthfully, it doesn't delete it from the actual database, it just removes it from the account info drop-down selection. So I've got this account that I've just created. If I wanted to delete it, I could go in there and select delete and answer yes, and it tells you your record has been deleted successfully, which it has because it's no longer in this account info. If I go to the deleted account view, now I can see that there's the account there. If I want to add that account back in, I simply would click on it and click restore, and it'll add the account back in there, and there she is. Cards info. This is the screen that you would use to add in cards, make changes to existing cards. So if we're going to add a brand new card into the program, click on the Add button, and on your Add Card configuration window, the first thing we need to do is select which account we're going to add this card into. So I'm going to select the account that I added in previously for the account screen demo. So that's the account. Card status, we're going to make this a valid card. Okay, and then we can assign what restrictions we want. If we're going to use reasonability or not, we can assign a reasonability code. This would be the odometer reasonability. If your fuel site controller is set up to have allocation daily or monthly, then we need to put in proper values in these two fields. On the upper right hand side, we need to select what type of card we're going to create. So let's say I'm going to select a single type MAG card. Now it backfilled the card number field with the first 12 digits. So all I'd have to do is key in my last 4 digits to make the number legit. And is the card going to go to all sites, or do I want this card only go down to certain zones? Okay, I'll just select the test zone, and I'll give this card a unique name. And give it a short name. This is the short name field, is what gets passed over to the fuel site controller. And if I'm using PIN numbers in the fuel site controller for all my cards, I can assign a PIN number to it, or I can have Phoenix generate me the PIN number. If I'm using odometer reasonability for the single card, then I need to know what the current odometer is. If I don't, I could set that to 0. Okay, if I'm not using odometer reasonability and I just want the card to prompt for an odometer, then all I simply have to do is check on the checkbox that says allow odometer entry. So it's one or the other. If you're using expiration dates in your fuel site controller, then you need to basically set up an expiration date. Here's your user defined fields. One of them was set up as a cell number, so I can actually put in someone's cell phone number here as a reference, and not using user defined number 2 for anything. And if I want to, I can assign prompts, and these are the prompts that came from the default templates card screen. So if I don't want these additional prompts to be used for this card, I can simply just delete them out and basically click apply, and that'll add that card into the database of Phoenix. If this is going to be a chip key, and it's a read-write chip key, so you have the mileage reasonability option in the system, then you basically want to make sure that this box, when it's available to you, is set up to do read-write chip key. So that will only be available for you for single type records or vehicle type records. Let's say the card that I created was assigned to the wrong account and I need to reassign it to a different account altogether. The first thing we need to do, obviously the reassign is grayed out, as you can see on the taskbar here. We need to find where that card is currently assigned to. So on the view by account drop down selection, select the account that the card is currently under, and basically it lists out the one card that is underneath that particular account. If I want to reassign this card to a different account, now I have the reassign account button available to me. I click on the reassign account button, select the card or cards if there are a few of them, and select which account I want to move it to. Okay, and I'm just going to move it to OPW Mac cards and click apply, and now you'll see that on the card info screen there's no cards underneath this account. If I go back to account 1, there is the card that we just reassigned. If you made a mistake creating your cards, meaning you were creating single cards and they needed to be driver cards, or the driver card needs to be a single card, or vice versa, you can change the card type once the card's been created within the program. First of all, you need to find out where this card is located at. So I'm just going to pick the first account off of my list here, and I'm listing all the cards that are available to me. Let's say I want to look at my single cards only now. Once I do that, my change card type is available to me. So if I leave this on account 1 and set it to all, you'll see that I cannot alter the change card type because it's not available to me. So it's got to be specific to the card type that you're currently looking for, and it'll allow you to go into this field now and change it. So now it's listing all the cards in that account, and these are my choices, either driver or vehicle, because these are set up as single cards. So maybe I can select all of them if I want to and click apply, and basically it'll assign all those cards as driver. So now the card info screen, it's still set to single. There's no card showing up on the list any longer. Now if I change this to driver, and it has all the driver cards assigned to it now. And same thing would hold true as if you had vehicles. So that's how you change the card type. Under card utilities, we have a status indicator, and when we click on the status indicator, we have we can look at the statuses of any function that we would have performed that's involving with doing card updates, backups, resends, restores. So you would select the site that you want to check and select the activity. And these are the activities that you can check to see if you were doing a card update, for instance, and you sent the card update down. When you click on the update and you click on refresh status, if there was any activity going on between the service engine pushing the update down to the fuel site controller, that would be indicated on the screen here. Obviously we don't have a record here to display, but it would show you what mode it's in, whether it's actually doing the update or if the update is successfully finished or if there was a failure. So you can check the status on card updates, if you did a resend function, a card backup, or a card restore. Continuing on with card utilities, when you're adding cards into the program, you need to push the updates down to your site controllers. So if you wanted the update to go down immediately to your sites, you would click on the site that you want to push the card update down to, and then you click on the update selection, and you'll get this message that says you have requested Phoenix to execute a card update process to site 001. Click yes to continue. You would click on yes, and it'll send that message down to the service engine. And basically you would use your status button to refresh that view and check to see what the status is of that update. So it's telling us right here it has not yet started, but it's waiting to be started. Continuing on with card utilities, let's say we're bringing a brand new site online, okay, and we need to get all the cards that are already in Phoenix down to that specific site. So the site is already created within Phoenix. To send the cards down to this new site, you would click on the site number from your site ID list, and you would click on resend. Again, you're going to get the message that says you have requested Phoenix to perform a resend card process to site 002. It will not execute unless the site controller's card file is currently empty. Click yes to continue. So I'm going to click yes, and it lets you know that the service engine has gotten the request, and we can go over and click OK on this screen. You can click on status, select the site number from your site ID list, and the activity we want to look for is the resend, and click on refresh status. And once this would fire off, it would show you the status update. Continuing on with card utilities, we have backup cards. So if you want to create an individual backup from a site, you can click on the site that we want to do the backup from, click on backup, and answer yes. And it lets you know that your request has been sent to the service engine. You can monitor the operation of the site by clicking the status button and then selecting the site in operation you want to monitor. So I'll go to my status again, select what site and the activity, which was the card backup. Click on refresh status, and here again it has not yet started, but it would indicate when the site is going to be completed. If we need to restore the backup file to a specific site, we can go and select the site that we want to restore the cards to, and click on restore. And because we haven't done a backup yet, or the backup hasn't taken place, it shows that there is no backup file available yet. but if there was, then we'd be able to go ahead and do the restore function. If you're adding in a new site that had cards already programmed in it, and you didn't want to program those cards into the Phoenix database, the import card process allows you to import a backup file. So obviously you'd have to do a card backup first of that new site, or actually it's an existing site that you're adding into the newly installed Phoenix. Once you've done the card backup of the site, then you would click on import cards, and then you'd have to select the site that you were actually trying to generate a card backup from, and give you availability of importing the cards. I don't have a card backup file to demo this properly, but what that would do is if there's a backup there, it'll import the card backup file, and that would populate like your card information screen and your account system 2 account information screen. Our next section is called the scheduler. It's broken down into two functions. One's called the FSC scheduler, and the second one's called ATG scheduler. On the FSC scheduler, you can see that there's several events that have already been pre-configured. We'll click on the first event here and click at it at the very bottom. And the parameters for the event is called test, and the type of event is called poll site. You can see from the drop-down selection you have the capability of a backup system, and that would be only for System 2 site controllers. You can do a backup card, poll the site, update card, or print a report. So this is poll site, and you can see that they've selected 4 sites out of the many that are on the list for this event. The retries was set to 3, so that means they'll have 3 attempts to try to do this event for all of these locations. Then you have what's called a frequency setup. This one was set up to only execute one time only. You can change this and execute at regular intervals. You can have selections of hours, days, weeks, and months, and then you put in what parameter you'd like. So if we wanted to do this every day, we set it to every 1 day, and then you would select when do you want this first to start, and I'll give this tomorrow's date, at what time, and we can set this up to maybe do this at 8 in the morning. Oops. Okay, and underneath poll options, because this is a polling event, I have the capability of disabling the card updates automatically, and if I have a tank monitor, I can have it set up to poll my tank gauge after it's done polling the fuel site controllers. And then I click on update, and basically lets me know that I've updated that particular event. And it's not enabled currently, so if I want to go ahead and re-enable that event, I click on edit underneath parameters and enable it. Now if I go back to my scheduler listing, you'll see that that event is enabled. It tells you when the next time it's going to fire off, and the result is unknown because I just changed the parameters on it. You can see the one down below it was called test poll. The last time it was set up to do it was September 30th, and it missed it. A missed event typically will only happen is if for some reason the service engine is shut down on the actual server that it's set up to run on. And then the next event below that is a failed event. That means it actually tried to do something and it failed to connect for whatever reason. And then you have another missed event here. So as you can see, you can set up various functions underneath the type here. Also underneath the FSC scheduler event, once your events are scheduled, if you want, you can run the events immediately without waiting for it, the date and time that it needs to be executed on. So if I wanted to, I can click on this first event, and if I click on run down below, this will tell it to go ahead and run it immediately. And then you could check later on the history to see if the event was successful or not. So you can do that with each event that you've got set up to schedule. You can just go ahead and click run, and it runs it immediately. It will still run on the event on its duration, time frame that it should run. You'll just have basically an immediate result from the one that you ran manually. To check the history of your scheduled events, click on the history button down below and select the site ID that you want to check the history for. And basically it will show you the date and the time that it attempted to run and what event it was. This was a trans poll. As you can see, these were all fails. Site 2, these are all fails. Site 3, that was a fail. So this is all demo equipment, but indications that you normally would see should be successful or pass. If there was a gauge poll, it would show you what was pass or fail, card update, and so forth. And if you want to clear the results of the status for the scheduled event, that's what the erase button allows you to do. The ATG scheduler works similar to the FSC scheduler. You have an event that you can create. It will bring up the current one that's set up in the program. Go to parameters. The name of the event was called test poll gauge. Type. These are your types of events. You can set it up to do an inventory poll, a delivery, or print the report out. So this one was set up for site 1. It's got one retry. This event was enabled. And here again, you got your frequency, and this is set up to do it every day starting October 2nd, 2013 at 8 a.m. If we wanted to set up another event, we could do that. We'll click add, and we'll call it poll ATG delivery. And we're going to select the type as delivery, same site. We got one retry, enable it, and we'll have this set up to run every day starting tomorrow at 12:04 a.m. And there's your second event. To run an ATG schedule event immediately, you click on your event that you want to run, and then click on the run button. And then you'll click yes to you have requested Phoenix to execute the test poll gauge event. And it lets you know that it's been sent to the service engine. If you want to run the other event, click that other event and click run also. To check the history of your ATG scheduled events, again you click on the history button down below and select the site ID. And here you can see that the event has never passed, so we haven't been connecting to the gauge at all. But normally you should see a success or a pass in the gauge poll. The gauge poll doesn't break it down to whether it was an inventory delivery because they're both part of the gauge poll. Okay, the next section we're going to cover are the FSC transactions. When you go to FSC transactions, if you click on transaction info, that'll bring up the page of all your transactions that have been successfully downloaded into the Phoenix program. You'll see on the left hand side there are some filter options. We can filter by a specific site, specific account, a date range, and then you have your view by. We can look at transactions that are flagged as having a bad odometer. And by clicking on filter, it'll give me a listing of all my transactions that are flagged as having a bad odometer. And you can see I have 42 records. And if I click on any one of the records from the list, it'll show me why the transaction is flagged as having a bad odometer. There's the odometer value, and it just tells me it's less than previous. So that means that the mileage that was inputted on this transaction is less than the previous entry that was pulled. I can look at incomplete transactions. Here, those would be transactions that were pulled into Phoenix, but the card or cards were missing from the Phoenix side, so it had nowhere to put the totals to. And you can see I've got 318 of those transactions. And if I click on one of those from the list, and it shows me that this card number is not in the Phoenix program. That's why this transaction got flagged as incomplete. Then I can look at my network transactions, and my network transactions would be the bank type card transactions or fleet. Shows I have 23 records here, and I'll click on the first one from the list. Click at it, and there is all my information about this bank card transaction. And then the last view by is complete. So these will list out all my proprietary card transactions that are not flagged as having a bad odometer or incomplete. And there's all the information about a particular transaction. If you're running your site in manual mode and you wanted to add that transaction into the program, to do that, you on your transaction info window, click add at the very bottom of the screen. Select what site you want this transaction to be created for. Click it on the date range. Click on put in a time. And you notice that it automatically populates a transaction number that starts out the letters M as in Mary and then 001. That means it's a manually added in transaction. Account ID and account name will be populated as soon as you select the card number from your card list. And I'll just select this one here, and you'll see that that populated the account ID with OPW Fleet Link as the name, ID number I should say, and the account name is called this. Okay, I mean this is set up as a single card in the system, so that's the reason why the vehicle record field is grayed out. It's not a driver. I don't have to put in a sequence number if I don't want to. The hour reading is the actual miscellaneous entry field, so if you're keying in some, if they were going to key in some hour reading, they can key that in and add that to the record. We do need to see the 2-digit pump number, and if it's just a single grade hose, you just put in one hose. So that means it's pump 1, hose 1. Product ID, 01 is our unleaded. What the price per gallon is. The actual quantity that was dispensed. Make sure it include a decimal point. as well as in the price. When you click on, press enter on that, it'll calculate the actual total. If there was an odometer value, you can key in what the odometer value is. The name was already populated automatically from the employee card number. We don't get a vehicle name because this is only a single type card, not a driver. And because this is grayed out for the vehicle entry, so is the vehicle name. And then a termination code, we could leave that blank. You add that to the system, and that transaction now is in the program. I can go to transaction info now, and I should be able to search for a transaction by today's date. And there she is. To edit a transaction that's in Phoenix, you click on the transaction that you want to edit and click the edit button down below, and it'll bring up that current record on your screen. So like say if your clock was off in the fuel system due to you didn't spring back or fall back or spring ahead, you can change the time on it and click apply. Or maybe the card number that was being used was assigned to the wrong account or something, or is the wrong card being used, you need to bill it to a different card. And because I changed that to a driver card, now it wants to see a vehicle card, and I can click apply there. Okay. And also this could come in handy is if the dispenser had a problem where the pulser was messing up on the system, and basically it was sending the Petrovent equipment the wrong pulses per gallon setting, and the quantity, instead of being 10.19 gallons, maybe it was supposed to be 101.9. Well, this allows you to go ahead and correct that. So there's your examples of how you can edit a transaction. Export data. On the export data screen, we have some filter criteria. We can select underneath the site all sites or site-specific information. Same holds true for account. We can do all the accounts or certain accounts only. We can include network transactions or manually entered in transactions if we'd like. And then we have the export status. We can select never exported, transactions that were previously exported, or both. And then we have a flag setting whether or not we want the transactions that we're creating an export for to be flagged as exported to fleet. We have export all, or we can select date range. So you'd specify a beginning date and an ending date. And last would be the export file type that you want to create. And then you basically would click on your export button, and an export file would be then tried to be created for your information. Under the reprice section, we allow you to reprice your transactions from the original price that the transactions were generated and posted into Phoenix for to a new price if you need to. We can select the date range that you want to reprice the transactions for. Select which accounts. Okay. And then you would need to know, you can select all accounts by selecting that button there. And then you would need to know what products you want to reprice the transactions for, include their dollars and cents. Okay, for each grade. And basically When you click the reprice button, it'll attempt to try to reprice those transactions that are in Phoenix for that date range to the new price that you're specifying there. It allows you to know that the repricing of the transactions cannot be reversed. Once it's changed, the original price is lost. You want to continue, yes or no? So that's entirely up to you. So if you don't want to reprice, you would answer no. If you do want to reprice, then those transactions that are affected by that date range and that grade will be showing up at that new price. Deleted transactions. These would be transactions that were deleted from the actual transaction info screen. Here's one example that we have right here. Basically, the only thing that you can do is just look at it. If you had a lot of transactions that were deleted, you can then search to see which of those had bad odometers or if they're incomplete or network or complete transactions. If you made an accident of deleting the transaction, you could restore that back into the database by clicking restore. Here again, I'll go back to my transaction info and maybe I'll select this guy here and delete that. And I'll select another guy here and delete that. Now that I've got those two transactions deleted, they're truly deleted from the transaction info window and you won't be able to report on them. However, you can restore them back in. So if I wanted to see which one of those transactions is a network transaction, I can click on filter and would show you this transaction here is a network transaction. If any of these are flagged as incomplete, it would show up an incomplete or a bad odometer transaction or incomplete or complete. And if I want to restore the transactions back into the program, I would click on restore and then do the next one. ATG data. Underneath ATG transactions, this would show you the transactions as far as inventory and deliveries for your sites that have tank monitors, and also if you don't have a tank monitor, will allow you to add manual transactions for inventory and deliveries to these sites. To look at the transactions referred to as inventories and deliveries, select your site and we have inventory selected, and these are all the inventories that were posted into Phoenix for this site. If I click on one of these, I can bring up the edit function and allows me to just view the inventory at the time that the polling was done. So you have your inventory date, inventory time, the inventory gross, the net volume, ullage, product height, temperature, water volume, and water height. You do have a choice whether or not you want to use this inventory in your reconciliation reports. Okay, so it's a yes, no. If I want to look at another site, I can, and there's additional sites. If I want to look at the inventories, not inventories but deliveries, I click on deliveries, and whatever site I'm currently in, it'll show me my deliveries for that site. And here again, I can pick anyone off the list and click on edit, and it'll show you whether or not there's the delivery, the date, start time, the end time, what was delivered, a delivery net, and there shouldn't be any delivered water, and you could put in a bill of lading. So this is what the gauge is showing that we delivered, but maybe they're putting in on the bill of lading that they delivered 440 gallons. So you can put that information in for the bill of lading. Okay. Continuing on with ATG data, if you want to be able to report on inventories from your tanks that are underground, but you don't have a tank monitor at the site, Phoenix will allow you to input that information into the program. So first of all, what we need to do is select the site and click the Add button down below. Underneath the ATG configuration, it should list out what sites are set up in Phoenix that do not have an ATG connected to it. So we'll select site 6, and let's say we want to add an inventory. We have to add a tank in for site number 6 to properly do this. So this is going to take us back to our site page. We're going to go to tanks, and we're going to go into site 6, and we're going to add one tank. And I'll make this tank number 1. The tank type I'll just make standard, and we'll say it's got unleaded product. Okay, so now if I go back to my ATG transactions data, I'm going to go over to site number 6. I'm going to click on add, and I still need to go ahead and select site 6 from the list. Okay, and ATG inventory is one I want to select. So now I have the tank number. I have my choice of whether or not I want to reconcile with this. You can answer yes or no appropriately. And let's give it today's date. The time that you stuck the tank. We'll just leave the default that just showed up in there now, and I'll say it's got it had 6,000 gallons. That's what the gross was. I don't know what the net is of that. I don't know what the ullage is, but I do know what the product height is. So say at 45 inches, that's what 6,000 gallons is. I'm assuming the temperature is at 60 degrees, but if you don't know that, you can leave it blank or put something in there. Water volume, I'd leave that at 0. Water height, 0. And I can now click apply and add that into the program. So now if I go to ATG data and select site 6 from my list, it will show me the inventory that I just created manually for that particular site. The same thing will hold true if you want to add in your deliveries for a site that doesn't have a tank monitor. To add the delivery to, click on the ATG delivery window, the site, put in the date. We'll just leave the start and end time the same here for this demo. So to do the delivery for this site, we're going to go and click on add, go to ATG configuration, select the current site, and we're going to do a delivery now. Okay, put in the delivery date. Put in the correct times if you want. Put the amount that they delivered. If you know what the delivered net is, you can put that in, or the delivered water, or leave those fields blank. And the last thing would be the bill of lading. So if they're telling you they delivered 5,000 gallons, and the bill of lading should show the same amount because this is all being hand generated. And then click on apply, and they'll add that delivery date to the system. If we need to edit an existing inventory or delivery, we can do that. We select the site that we need to make the edit change to, and we'll select site number 1. And on the inventory, what you can edit would be whether or not you want that inventory to be used in the reconciliation process report. Okay, so if for some reason you had multiple pulls of the inventory of the site within 5 minutes, chances are you would want to include both of those inventories on the same report, so you can remove the latter one from appearing into the reconciliation report. The other thing that you can do is select deliveries that you want to edit, and you have what's called a bill of lading, a BOL. A lot of times this is what the truck driver is going to tell you he delivered. So the gauge measures how much it was delivered, and then the truck driver is going to tell you how many the actual gallons he actually delivered into the tank. So that bill of lading will show up on your actual reconciliation report also. The delete function allows you to only delete information as far as inventories or deliveries for sites that do not have a tank gauge configured in the SQL program. So if I select a site that has a tank gauge and I try to click delete, it won't allow you to delete it. It tells you cannot delete delivery or inventory information to a site with an ATG configured. Okay, so if I go into one of my sites, 5 or 6 I believe, and let's say I want to delete this inventory for whatever reason it may be. Maybe it was incorrectly put in, or I just don't want that to show up on any report. I can go ahead and click on delete, and it will allow me to delete that record from the system itself. Okay, if I go into my other site, my FleetLink site, I can do the same thing. It allows me to delete that record. So only on sites that have no tank gauge configured will the delete function allow you to remove those records. Prior to running any type of an activity report where the MPGs need to be calculated out, go to Report Utilities, and on your Report Utilities screen you have the choice of Calculate MPGs for only new transactions, or you can select Recalculate MPG for all transactions dated, and you can begin a start and end date. Or if you want to do all the transactions, you click all. Typically, I would tell people put in the beginning and ending date that you're attempting to run a report for, and then click apply to run that feature. And when you go and click apply, it'll go through and calculate the MPGs and let you know that it was successful. Prior to going into any of these reports, you have some choices that say run the report by a standard date or a relative date. The difference is a standard date, you're actually putting in a beginning and an ending date range to run your specific report. Relative date, these are your choices. You've got today, yesterday, and you can see the list that goes down the list. So most of these reports you have a relative date and a standard date selection. Underneath the Administrator Report section, we have choices of running a report for the address book, audit trail data, error details, fuel zone data, or group details. I'll just select the first report off the list to give you a sample of what the report would look like. So when you click on the address data report, I have choices of selecting the date, city, organization, title, or I can just select the address book by the user. So if I select the report by the user, I'm going to go down and click on Generate Report. And this is the report for the address book, and it shows you the first name, last name of the user, what access he has, shows you he's a Phoenix login user, what group he's assigned to, he has view access, his status is active, that means he's currently an active Phoenix user. The next one down is Joe Black, and you can basically see who's he assigned to, which group, view group 001, 002, and so forth. So this is the report for the administration listed by users. Underneath site reports, we have a slew of reports we can run that are grouped by the sites themselves. We can run reports site by for accounts, sorted by card 1, card 2, card 1 being your driver card or single cards, card 2 being your vehicle cards. Then the DET stands for detail, and then we have summary reports grouped by the site, by account, or by the site, by card 1 or card 2, fuel provider listing, and so forth. So these are all the reports that are grouped underneath the site module of reports. You'll see at the list at the bottom you have your tank deliveries, tank inventory, and tank reconciliation report. We'll generate the tank reconciliation report, and you have your selection of starting out the site ID. So if you want to do one specific site, you can, or you can do all sites. I'll select site 1 for my start and end, and my calendar date. It's based by the data that I have in the program, so I'm going to set this back in the calendar, and I'll leave the end date through today's date, and hopefully that will generate me the report that I'm looking for. And here's the snapshot of my reconciliation report for site number 1 for that date range. And you can see where you have your opening volume column, your delivery column, total sales, the accumulated during that time frame, your ending volume, calculated volume, the variances, and then your end tank water height and water volumes, and your bill of lading entries if there were any, and the bill of lading variance. Under your account reports, the reports are grouped by your accounts, and again, you can run them. You can do an account card listing report. We'll list out all your accounts that are set up in the system and the cards that are assigned to them. Account constant data report, and an account master listing, and then you have some detailed reports where they're grouped by the accounts, sorted by card 1, which would be your driver cards, card 2 sorted by the vehicle cards, and then you've got various other reports listed there, single card reports that are grouped by the account, and so forth. So if I wanted to run a let's say a summary report for the account for product that was used, I would select the report, and then on my right hand side I'm going to select which account I want to do this report for. So if I want to do all the accounts, I will select all, and then I would select my standard date range that I want to run this report for. So I'm going to set this back based on the data that's in the program. And I'll leave the ending date till today's date and go and generate the report. And there's your summary of the account product report. Account for product, and there's the account number, and there's all your summary of how many transactions were generated for each product and the quantity and the amount. Underneath your card reports, here's where you can run reports by the card numbers themselves. So they're not grouped by a site, they're not grouped by accounts. You can run activity reports detailed by card 1 for all your drivers, detailed by card 2 for all your vehicles. So card 1 will show you all the driver cards and what vehicles they fueled. Card 2 would show you all the vehicles and what drivers fueled them. And then you have your single type card reports. So anything that has DET means it's a detailed report. Then you have the same type of reports that list out the word sum for summary. So it's just a summarization of the report. And then you have constant data listing, your master listings for both card 1 and card 2. If you're using global cards in the system, those would be cards that are not assigned to an account number and that can only be driver type or vehicle type. You have a global cards reports. Then you got a couple simple invoice reports. Let's do an activity detail by single cards report. So I'm going to select this one here, and I want to do all my cards. Now if you want to do a specific card only, by all means you would select the from your card list the card that you want to run for the beginning and ending card number. And then I'm going to use the standard date range and set this back based on the data that I have in the program. Actually, I want to go to 2009 just to be safe. And I'll go back to July. And I'll leave today's date open for the end date. And then I will generate a report. And here's the activity report. I'm trying to get this centered up for you. And there's the what we call was the employee number. That's the actual card number, the name of it, and it shows you the detailed information about the transactions that it used, the dates and the times, and the account that it was used under, the product, the pump number, the MPG that was calculated out, your odometer entries, the distance per unit, hour reading, price, quantity, and if I expand this out a little bit, you can see the actual amount. Underneath the transaction reports, if you're running the site that uses the miscellaneous entry and you want to be able to sort on that field, we have the activity detail by miscellaneous keypad, activity sum by miscellaneous keypad entry. So these reports would be sorted by the miscellaneous keyboard field entry data. Incomplete transaction reports, you have one that's detailed and one that's not. Basically it's going to show you the transactions that are flagged as incomplete and why they're flagged as incomplete. Then you have several multi-proprietary user entries 1 through 9. And this is when you're using the extra prompts and assigning those to either your accounts, your FSC accounts, or cards, and you want to be able to sort on those prompt entries for those prompts, then you can run any one of these reports. And then some of the networks, fleet networks, have prompting tied to their fleet cards like CFN and ComData. If that information is being pulled into Phoenix, then you could sort on those prompts for those fleet cards. And then you have the network trans by date, by product, and your odometer exceptions report. I'm just going to select the network trans by date off of this listing here and set my start date back in time. And generate the report. And these are the network transactions. And you can see these are this is an older version of FSC code because it's showing the entire card number. This is prior to being PCI compliant. Later versions you can see don't have the card numbers are being actually masked out, but it shows you what network it's on, authorization code, product, and so forth, pump, quantity, the amount. Under the product reports, you have two reports available to you. You have product totals by site for the year, or product totals for sites by date. If I generate the one for the year and specify what year I want to go back to, I'm going to safely say I want to go back to 2009 and select and generate the report. And you can see for the site the various totals for each month for each site that's included into the report. And it gives you a total at the very end for the entire year. If I select product totals for site by date, and I'll do all and set my calendar date back, and there's my report for product totals for sites by date, and it shows you the date range that it ran the report for and the breakdown of the products for each site, total number of transactions, and the total quantity. Underneath support tables, we can generate the reports how our card defaults are set up, chip key codes, product restriction codes, products, prompts, quantity restriction codes, or reasonability codes. I'll generate one listing out all the products the way the products are configured in our system. So when I click on products, there's no query to run other than generate the report. And there's a listing of all the products that are configured in Phoenix. With that report, you'd want to make sure that all your sites are mapped out the same way for each code number.